All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being so patient since we had to reschedule this thanks to Toby.
Yes.
So thank you so much. So welcome to Products That Count. How many of you have heard of Products That Count prior to purchasing your ticket? Good turnout. Okay, so let me just take a couple of minutes to talk about Products That Count, but before that, I should introduce myself. Sorry about that. I'm Andrea. I head up the New York City chapter of Products That Count. I also moonlight and run product and engineering at 1 Kings Lane. So what is Products That Count? Products That Count is a community of about, I would say, 17,000 at this point and growing, of product managers, entrepreneurs, innovators. And it's really, it started in San Francisco by S.C. Moati and has then expanded to New York City, sorry, excuse me, San Jose, and soon Seattle. So we're very excited. This is a group that really cares about products. So, again, how do you make products great or products that count? We have some great programming. So monthly speaker series like this, where we bring super high caliber speakers like our speaker tonight. Can't wait. We have podcasts, we have a newsletter, we have exec retreats. So really lots of stuff. Some rich content there. And then before we get started, I also want to just say thank you, by the way, to DigitalOcean. This space is amazing, right, you guys? Amazing. Thank you for the space, the food, and the drinks. And then also thank you to our sponsors, Amplitude and mParticle. All right, so tonight we have Xiaodi Zhang. She is the CPO at 1stdibs. I'm very, very excited to have her speak. She has also worked at eBay and Gilt. Amazing product leader. I first met Xiaodi and was just completely floored about like some of the conversations that we've had around business and building products. And so she's going to share her insights tonight on how to go from PM to CPO on her own terms. Welcome, Xiaodi.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you, everyone. I'm really excited to spend some time with everyone tonight to talk about my career path and to share some of my insights, and then would also welcome questions at the end. So let's get started. Building your own career path. I think one of the things that I've spent some time thinking about during the course of just putting together this presentation is how difficult it is actually to build a career path in product management, since it's relatively new in the entire sphere of career development and a new function. And then also there really aren't that many clear outlined career ladders out there that we can use. And so I want to spend some time to share some of my learnings and some of the mistakes that I've made, and hopefully you will find it helpful. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is sort of during the course of my 18-year career in product management, there have been kind of three nagging questions that I always think about. First is, how do I find the right job, right? So this is something that I'm sure all of you think about a lot, and what does that mean? What is a right job actually for me? And then secondly, when you find that right job, after a while, when should I leave, right? That's also a very, very difficult one to answer. And then lastly, for 12 years in my career, I always was trying to figure out, what does it actually take to become a C-level executive? And for my particular discipline, what would it take to become a CPO? So these are three core underlining questions that I hope to talk about and share some insights in tonight. So I think to start with, one of the key things that all of us are being very active in and thinking about is just being very deliberate about managing your own career. And again, as I mentioned, product management is such a new discipline. How do you actually grow your own career if there isn't necessarily a clear ladder out there? And and it's something that I always find surprising when I talk to people on my team who are unfortunately resigning, and they inevitably will say something like, oh, I wasn't even looking, and this recruiter contacted me, this company contacted me, and it seemed like a great fit. And I know they're saying that to make me feel better, but I do always want to say to them that, gosh, I hope you were looking. I hope you were deliberate about what you want to find in your next role, because if you were, in fact, just convinced by a really, really effective recruiter, and we know there are plenty of those out there, then how do you know that this is actually the right fit for you? And this is something that I think will come back through during the course of my conversation tonight, and something to think about. So if I take a step back and look at my career and map it out over the course of the last 18 years, it looks like it's a fairly linear trajectory, going from product manager to senior product manager to group manager to director, senior director, and CPO. But along the course of that trajectory, I have actually made a number of mistakes, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. But because I didn't, and those mistakes were due to the fact that I wasn't spending as much time being deliberate about those changes and making sure that I was, taking the right, making the right decision for my career. But you, of course, can course correct, which we'll talk about as well. So the core to what I want to share with you guys tonight is when you're finding your right job, how do you know it's the right job? And for me, I have always found that the key is actually being really, really honest with myself about what I'm really good at and what I really need. And we talk a lot about radical candor these days within organizations and companies, but I think one of the most important things you can do to invest in your career is to be radically honest with yourself. And that needs to be continuous as well. So it's not necessarily about what you would like to be good at. We can't necessarily, we want to also understand what we want to be good at, but sometimes it's easy to mistake what you think you're really good at from what you're actually your core strengths. So because I'm a nerd and I like 2x2s, the way that that I want to share this process with you guys is breaking it down to a 2x2, and on one axis, thinking about your strengths in terms of your core competencies, your comparative advantages, and your weaknesses. On the other axis, you should really think about what are your motivations, what are some of the things that you feel like will get you up in the morning and make you want to go to work. What are your needs in order to actually succeed in a particular environment? And then also take the time to learn what type of environment actually makes you unhappy and will detract from your success. That's super critical as well. So if we just go through the different quadrants, on the bottom left, this is probably fairly easy to identify that if a company doesn't necessarily align with your core strengths and it's not a company that you're super excited about and motivates you, it's definitely kind of a warning sign that it's not going to be the best fit for you. So as an example, if New York Times or AOL or even Google called me tomorrow about an advertising type of role, that's just not necessarily actually play to my strengths. And even if they offer me a lot of money, I don't feel like I could succeed in that type of role. So just moving up to a role where, it actually does leverage your strengths. However, the company environment is not necessarily set up for your success. And there are a lot of those companies out there. I think that companies that seem to be doing really well, but then you find out that, gosh, internally there might be a lot of infighting, or the company is losing money, or or they're just politically, like politics, internal politics. And even if it's a perfect job, if it's a senior role, but it doesn't necessarily gel with what you need in order to succeed, you should just proceed with caution. Maybe it's going to pay you a lot and meet some financial goals, but make sure you kind of go into it with open eyes. So if we move to the bottom right quadrant, this is an interesting area where a company that you're super passionate about, let's say, it's Airbnb, you're super excited about the mission and what it stands for, but then none of the roles necessarily play to your strengths. So it's sort of a stretch goal for you, but it's actually a great opportunity for you to develop certain skills. So that's actually, I think, earlier on in our careers, these are the type of jobs where we can learn a lot and benefit from, but it's definitely not a clear win-win. And obviously the last one, if you're lucky enough to find a role where you're super excited about the company, it motivates you, it's going to set you up for success, and you are able to leverage your strengths, then that should be a win-win. So it seems fairly easy, but something to keep in mind is as we grow and develop our careers, our strengths and needs will change, right? So who I was and what my competencies were 18 years ago, obviously is very different from where I am today. And so that will help you, understanding how you're changing will help you look for opportunities to identify when you need to leave your job and find another one. So again, is when when your strengths and needs evolve beyond your role and the company, that's probably the right time to start looking for a new job. So I just wanted to use my own career development as an example. When I started my career, my first job was actually at Capital One. I was a project manager. I really honestly didn't have that much to offer, to be perfectly honest, in terms of a product manager. I really didn't know anything about software development, didn't understand architecture of a website, all the basic things that you would need, but I was a really, really hard worker. I was a great communicator, and I was a strong project manager. And I really wanted to get into tech. And I felt like in order for me to succeed, since I had no real experience, I needed to be at a company that was fairly stable, where I could learn a lot, but that actually moved very quickly to give me those opportunities. And somehow I convinced NextCard, the first online credit card issuer, to give me a job. I think they sort of assumed that I would have some information that I didn't, and have some experience that I didn't. But and honestly, it really was one of those opportunities that I fought really hard to get into, and it was definitely the bottom right quadrant, where I was super motivated, excited, but I knew that it was a long shot and had to prove myself day in and day out. Similarly, Digital Insight as well. After NextCard, moved into Digital Insight, which was a SaaS business, and again, had no clue what SaaS even stood for, and didn't really understand what I was signing up for, but I knew that I could learn a lot. I really loved the people I interviewed with. I felt like these were the right people to set me up for further success. And so if we fast forward 10 years after spending 4 years at NextCard and Digital Insight, and 6 years at eBay, and 1 year at Gilt, I started to think about, where do I see myself and what do I need in terms of my next step. And I realized, when I was at Gilt, I took this senior director role, so on paper that sounded really good, and I wanted to get my hands dirty. I felt like after 6 years at eBay, at a large company, I really needed to prove that I could work at a smaller company and get my hands dirty again. So I was an individual contributor and working on some interesting projects. But at the end of the day, I just felt like it wasn't tapping into my core strengths. I didn't have a seat at the executive level. I wasn't able to hire and build a team and define a process. And the company's mission, while I was super passionate about buying from Gilt, I wasn't necessarily, super passionate about the core mission. And then separately on the company side, in terms of the environment, I really felt like I needed to be at a company that would be a lot more tech-driven, where product was the core of the company versus retail. And I wanted to be part of the executive team and a CEO to understand and appreciate product versus me having to evangelize and define what product was to everybody in the company. So, knowing that helped me understand that 1stdibs was the right opportunity. And when 1stdibs came to me and David Rosenblatt, the CEO, met with me, I think it's one of those things, just in the first 30 minutes, I knew that this was actually a really, really interesting opportunity. Again, it played to all of my strengths. I knew I could make an impact, but at the same time, it was the right environment for me to enable my success. And not spending the time to know what I actually didn't want and what I needed, I wouldn't necessarily have identified this as the right opportunity for me. And during the entire interview process, I actually spent just as much time interviewing David, and I even back-channeled him, and I asked him to give me references, and then really made sure that we could be partners and this was the right type of role for me. And that's really important for all of us as we grow our, manage and grow our careers, especially at the senior levels. And one of the other things that I spent a lot of time thinking about when I think about my career is, it's not necessarily about the job that you're doing today. It's actually, where do you want to be after this job? And knowing that actually can help you create a path forward. So much earlier on, I knew that I wanted to work in China, and I had no idea how to get there, but knowing that that's where I wanted to be, I self-selected and made sure that I worked at companies like eBay that had a global reach and global opportunities. So creating your own stepping stones is super important, especially again in product management, where sometimes it's not clear what the next path, what the right path looks like. And then I think if all of you guys are probably interested in potentially being a chief product officer one day, or senior C-level executive one day. So take the time to know what it takes to be a chief product officer, right? So I can share with you what kind of a typical day, my day would look like, and it involves focusing on people. I have a great team. Some of them are here, and making sure that I spend enough time developing them, mentoring them, creating the right environment, motivating them. But also I have to spend a lot of time on process. And I'm not someone who loves process, but that's just part of the job. And it's really important to make sure that we have the right process and tools in place to ensure everybody's success and creating alignment with the rest of the organization. And then lastly, strategy. This is super critical to C-level executives. You're not just executing, you're actually defining the strategy, identifying gaps in the business model, looking at the metrics day in and day out. So that's sort of what a CPO looks like at 1stdibs. If you are interested in becoming a CPO one day, and I definitely wanted to be one, starting probably 10 years ago, I've been focusing on developing these skills to help me actually not just achieve a CPO position, but also to be successful as a CPO, right? And that's one of the other things to keep in mind is actually a lot of us spend a lot of time focusing on getting that promotion, getting that job, but the reality is, unfortunately, achieving that goal, getting the job, is really just the beginning. And I've learned that the hard way. I remember, when I first got the job to work in China at eBay, that was like a lifelong dream for me. And I was so excited. It's like, this is it. I've achieved my goal. And my first day on the job in Shanghai, one of our community managers asked me to speak in front of a room of Chinese sellers and talk to them about the product release that I had just worked on in Chinese. And so I left China when I was 9, and my vocabulary is really good when it comes to food items like wontons and noodles and dumplings. And then, all of a sudden, I had to talk about the toolbar on, eBay's desktop and notifications, like all of these vocabulary words. I had completely no idea, what I was talking about. And it was the most painful 45 minutes probably of my career. And it was a real wake-up call that, this is just the starting line. Great, you got the job. What, do you want to succeed in your job? And what does it take to actually succeed and build your career versus just achieving the goal? And, and it relates a lot to what I do on a daily basis as the Chief Product Officer at 1stdibs. When I first got the job, again, it was like, yes, lifelong dream achieved. I'm now the CPO, a C-level executive. Well, guess what? It's a lot harder than being a director, like 10 times harder. And, but on a daily basis, I'm continuously learning. I am, more and more confident today than I was 6 years ago in doing my job, thankfully. And hopefully this will, this experience will lead me to my next role. And so kind of just to summarize and wrapping up in terms of the questions that I talked about earlier, how do I find the right job, and when do I know to leave, and how do I become a C-level executive? I think that keys that I would recommend is being as honest as you can about yourself, and take the time investing in understanding your strengths and your needs and your motivations. And then also set longer-term goals and objectives rather than short-term optimizations for yourself. And lastly, sometimes it's really important to be patient. If there are specific skill sets that you don't have, take the time to build those skills. But then knowing your long-term goals and knowing so much about yourself, also be opportunistic. So when an opportunity like a 1stdibs or something that comes up, you'll know that it's your time to seize it. And lastly, just want to share with you guys a fun photo. So this was taken on day 3 of when we first arrived in the US. So as you can tell, does anyone recognize the background? This is actually from Chinatown. And so I was 9 years old. This was back in 1986, a long, long time ago. And I spoke like 5 English words or something. And I think that one of the things that I've learned in my career is that it helps to dream a little bit bigger. It's not, obviously when I was 9, I had no clue. My parents told me it was just a vacation to be in the US rather than, actually staying here. But I definitely would not have imagined that I would be standing here today and sharing my insight about my career and talking about being a CPO, but it's really important that all of us set those goals for ourselves and think about those goals a little bit bigger than we can potentially imagine for ourselves. Thank you. We're going to open it up for questions.
Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Hector Enriquez.
Hi.
Just curious how you close the technology background gap.
Yes, that's a great question. So one of the things that I realized early on is that, obviously having had no experience in technology, it was going to be hard for me to move into product management, period. But to work for a tech company, period, actually, I should say. However, I could leverage what I was good at and what I had some level of expertise in, and then move to a company where I could potentially, leverage that experience. So, Capital One is a credit card, a financial services institution, credit card company, and NextCard, the first company I worked at, was an online credit card company. So given that they were both financial institutions and credit card companies, I sort of talked myself into, getting that job, even though I actually didn't have that much experience in credit card. I was working in the collections office at Capital One doing project management. But you have to figure out your kind of entry, right? So and that worked for me, and that was also how I got a job at Digital Insight. So that Digital Insight was also a software company focused on financial services. So I was able to parlay my kind of, at some limited knowledge of financial services to work at Digital Insight. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit about when you started managing product managers and when that happened? Mm-hmm. Was that also managed? Was that at eBay?
Yeah. Actually, I started managing on my first job as a product manager at NextCard. I don't know why they gave me that responsibility, but I managed a team of 3 people my first job. And I do know why. I was fairly responsible and good at doing what I was doing. But yeah, that was a very great experience, but definitely challenging, obviously. And I wasn't great at it, I don't think. And I'm continuously actually improving. And people management is definitely one of those areas that I'm not sure you can ever be great at. You're just constantly learning about what not to do and try to make as few mistakes as you can. Yes, Perna?
Thanks, Xiaodi. It was a great talk. So my question is actually back to the quadrant, which I very much associate with.
Uh-huh.
What happens, and you kind of mentioned about course correcting,
right.
Like what happens when you do realize you're kind of in a role that you're like, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
But I'm asking for a friend, not me.
Oh, yeah. Sure. No, we've all been there.
Can you talk a little bit about like what steps can you proactively take in your current role, and then like at what point do you be like, this is not working and I need to go do something else now?
No, it's a really, really great question. It depends. I've had my share. So at Intuit, when I first joined Intuit, basically the role was senior product manager, and it was a raise, and it felt like on paper it was the right decision. But then when I joined, I quickly realized actually the responsibilities, was actually smaller than what I had done before. And it was one of those situations I quickly looked around and asked if I could change the environment. And unfortunately, in large companies, some of you probably know, when you join the company, you have to stay in that role for at least a year, right? And to me, that seemed like too long of an investment, right? So I started looking basically on day 2. And however, That's not true, actually, probably day 30. But it is really important while you're there to build relationships and to not be jaded, right? So that's the other thing to keep in mind is you want to be positive. You want to make a really strong impression, even if you're there for a day or a month or 10 months, and build those relationships. And luckily, actually, some of the people I worked with there are still some of my friends. And it's really important. So one, of course, check if you can make a change within your role, within the company. And if you can't, then I would recommend just course correcting as soon as you can, but be positive about it and be honest, Yes.
I apologize that I'm the microphone guy and I have a question. I will be brief. But kind of continuing on to that, so how do you deal with in your career the road bumps that you might hit, or changes of companies, for example, getting laid off after many years at a certain level, or working at a slightly smaller organization where you were a director or VP and now all of a sudden you literally are taking a job as a PM title again. How do you manage that conversationally and with your own self-esteem and those type of things?
Yeah, and honestly, with my career trajectory, so even though, like my first job, for instance, I managed 3 people, and I was responsible for the entire front end of the platform. So in some ways, my responsibility was actually more of a director level. And then the next job, it was individual contributor level. So I felt like I was taking every step was like a step down in terms of responsibilities. But earlier on, you can take those risks because the upside is learning. So for me, I felt like, well, and then for instance, I remember very clearly trying to negotiate a senior PM title with eBay. It's like, look, I was managing this platform, responsible for the entire front end, managing people, and then manage a suite of products, and so forth and so on. I was senior PM at Intuit, and then Leonard Spicer, my manager, is like, well, that's the case for a lot of people who come to eBay, and we have fairly rigorous process internally. And to me, and actually at the time, I had a competing offer that paid more and also had the title, but it was a much, much smaller company. And the company, I wasn't super psyched about the mission. Whereas I was super psyched about eBay and knowing that it could potentially help me get to China, right? It's like, it's optimizing for your long term, not necessarily short term. So what that it's like just a PM, right? You have to but you have to know why you're making those concessions. I think it's really important. Yes?
What do you think is the best way to practice and get better at product management outside of work?
Outside of work. It depends on what you want to improve, I think, right? I mean, there's so many dimensions of being a product manager, right? There's like managing design, managing engineering, managing or critical thinking. And so, I mean, for me, it's been mostly at work. But it really depends. Like for instance, for design, one of the things that's really helped me was just taking ceramics classes because it taught me functional design, and thinking about product design in a functional way really helped me. But again, it depends on what part of product management that you really want to improve. Well, yes.
Hi. I'm at EXO, and
yes,
Brent
hi.
loves you, so we're a crew that's also a fan of you.
Oh, yeah.
But what I was going to ask is that, so you kind of, seems like your philosophy is like lean into your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other side of that is kind of like, okay, identify, you have your strengths, but then also like where are the gaps that you're trying to fill? And so how do you kind of bridge that gap or think about that in your 2x2 or as you kind of like make these decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, it's nothing is static, right? So the fact that I had no technical experience or understanding of how a website is built 18 years ago, that hasn't stopped me from being a lot more knowledgeable. But one of the things that I'm just very self-critical to know, like, actually these are the gaps that are holding me back from where I need to be in 4 years, right? And being very deliberate about focusing on those areas and giving myself opportunities to develop those skills. So as a tangible example, I really relish any time I can spend with the most technical person at a company. And one of the things that I did was just taking the architects out to coffee or spending time with them, shadowing them, making them show me the data architecture and walking it through, and so that I can understand. Or when we have meetings with like super technical meetings, I sign up for writing out the notes, because that actually is a forcing mechanism for me to actually know it firsthand. And over time, you will develop those skills, but first, you have to understand what the gaps are. Melinda? Oh, sorry. Yes, hi.
Hi. As you were getting promoted from PM to eventually CPO, do you feel like you had to manage up to your execs or higher ups, not only work hard, but also do that as well?
Oh boy, yeah. Every day. No, I mean, I think that what's different though is I think earlier on in your career, you sort of expect your manager to tell you what to do. But honestly, I think over the last 10 plus years, it shifts. You have to actually tell your manager what you are working on and what the roadmap should be and what we should be doing versus what we shouldn't be doing. And the role shifts a little bit, and they're a great sounding board, but they're not necessarily, like David is never gonna tell me how to run product or what I should be doing with my team, right? But he is, a huge resource for me to help me think about things that I might not be considering, to ask the right questions. But being very clear about your role and not necessarily expecting your manager to help define your role for you is important as you progress in your career. Because I've seen, I see people are often frustrated when they don't have very clear direction from their manager. And honestly, don't assume that your manager even knows how to direct you, right? Like, everybody's so busy, and especially as product managers, you should be the one who actually knows what we should be doing as a business for your product versus the other way around. Yes, hi.
Hi, I'm Jackie Doe. It's funny that, Jen, you caught that you should play in your strengths more. I actually took away that you should be in the bottom right quadrant more. And so you mentioned that some of the conditions that you found helpful for the bottom right quadrant were the company has to have money, your manager has to be decent, and then the third one that you talked about was that it should be fast-paced so that you can learn more. Right. And my question's around, are there any other conditions where a company or role is good for growing?
Yeah, I think the other thing is just the company should have some systems and structure and process in place where you can jump into the deep end and not drown. And that's very important. That seems very obvious, but it's not. I've worked at companies where there's just no clear process in terms of how to get anything done. And you're just fighting for resources, and you spend so much time churning, and you're not actually doing anything, right? Versus when I joined eBay, it was such a refreshing experience to jump in, and then on day 2, I'm told that I have to launch a huge project in a month or something, and I'm like, okay, what? But then all the resources were lined up, and things could move pretty smoothly. So make sure that you are probing those type of questions during the interview process to really understand how you're actually going to do your job versus just how great the company is. Melinda? Yeah.
So what would you say for people who are trying to be opportunistic or trying to look for their next role, but they're naturally introverts and networking is something that is very uncomfortable?
Right. No, that's a really, really good question. And is networking easy for anyone, honestly? I mean, it's just like, it's a little bit forced. And, but what I, did early on was sort of always, or actually even today, honestly, I mean, you should always have kind of the back of your mind a list of companies that you would definitely take a call from, right? And like the companies you admire, the companies that you would be interested in learning more about. And sometimes it's deliberate. And like, for instance, I got my job at Digital Insight by a cold email. I cold emailed a bunch of companies, but they responded to my email. And, but I studied the space. I was like, okay, based on my experience, what other types of companies could I work at? Which are those companies, and which companies are the best in that space, right? And I specifically targeted Digital Insight along with a couple other ones. And that's a cold email. That's not like schmoozing and networking. And it just happened that they were also looking. And so sometimes it's about timing, right? But I wouldn't feel like being introverted would necessarily hold you back, honestly. Yes?
Just a follow-up from that. When you're talking about cold emailing,
yes.
practically, how are you pitching yourself when you're about,
yeah.
How do you do that kind of cold
Sure. I think one is going back to some core principles, like know yourself, right? Know what you have done that actually might be appealing for the company. So, take advantage of the fact that if you are contacting New York Times, if you've worked at a media company, even if it's like a blog company, like any media company, like that might be interesting, right? And know what they're doing. So how do you do your research? Like if they're actually rolling out a new blog product or something, transition it to what you can offer. And that's one of the key things for employers. It's not just knowing that you've done a great job at your company. It's like, what can you do here? And that's super important to kind of position yourself. Okay. I know. But I'll be here. Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Hi, Nitya. How are
Hi,
you?
good. How are you?
Good.
My question to you is, are all chief product officer roles similar? Like, I've recently not applied for any CPO roles, so I don't know what the job description is like. Right. So I'm just wondering, are they like different for different companies, or is that something that you have to like come up with your own path, or?
No, it is different for probably different industries. What I realized though is that I wanted to be at a company where where product is fairly core to the company and the strategy. And if that is the case, then you need to actually think about business strategy and planning and process and so forth. But the people part, that's consistent across all, but there are definitely differences versus, let's say, like a SaaS business company, a sales-driven type of company, you might need to focus more on product marketing and sales and building relationships with sales and understanding sales process. Yeah. But do your research and yeah.
Hello.
Sure. Hi.
I wanted to ask a little more about what it looks like for you when you talk about introspection about your career. Mm-hmm. Like what kinds of practices or exercises or cadence or conversations do you have to sort of prompt investigating that question?
Great question. I think part of it is just that I'm a daughter of Chinese parents. They do a very good job of picking out all of my challenges and areas of development. So I've been always, very self-critical. But no, that's a, I think obviously there's review process and, but I spent a lot of time just talking to my peers, like, what can I do to do a better job? And I think people actually find those conversations to be both very productive, and it's a great way to build trust and build a partnership with your peers. And so I recommend doing that. But honestly, I feel like all of us, if we just take the time and think about it, we know. We sometimes don't want to know, but we know where our strengths are, and also, more importantly, what type of environment makes you successful. That is so important, because I realize that, for instance, eBay is a great company, and they had given me a number of opportunities to stay at eBay when I decided to leave, but I just felt like, gosh, it's such a large company that for me at that particular point in time, I really wanted to be at a smaller company. And knowing that about myself helped me make that decision. Otherwise, I would still be there and be unhappy potentially, which you never want to be in. Thank you guys so much, and I'll be here to answer any other questions. Thank you.
So, thank you, Xiaodi. That was amazing.
Thank you.
I actually get a chance to have breakfast with her tomorrow, so I'll pick her brain a little bit more. So, couple more things before we continue, since we still have food and wine, etc. So the first thing is, so before we do that, rather, so we do shout outs, by the way. I think, how many of you have done shout outs here with us before? Maybe not a lot. I know you have. So what are shout outs? So it's your basically 15 seconds of fame. If you are hiring, you have, so if you're hiring, you're looking for a job, maybe you have a product that you want to share, just come on up and give us your spiel. Because again, this is a great opportunity to share all of that. So I'll start, and I'm sure Xiaodi is going to as well. So like I said, I'm the VP of Product and Engineering at One Kings Lane. Lots of openings for engineering, technical project manager. I see Ronald here who's going to say the same thing. We have some design openings as well. So if you're interested, definitely come see me after. I'm going to pass it to you because I know you're going to say something. Go.
Same thing. Well, not actually engineering. Sorry. We're hiring product managers and designers and UX researcher as well.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to follow up on Andrea. So I'm a director of product on her team, and so I'm actively looking for a product manager, especially with somebody in interest in tools, internal tools, and then a technical project manager as well to join the team.
Hi, everybody. My name is Audrey Tiger, and I'm here from Austin, Texas.
Ooh.
Also part of the XO group. Thank you. Woo. And actually, we have a couple of different roles on my product team in Austin. So I know this is bizarro, but if any of you have been wanting to move to Austin because it's super hip and cool and cheaper, like you could actually afford to live there and have all kinds of awesome barbecue and tacos and margaritas, and you would get to work with me, and I'm a badass. So come on down, hit me up, Austin, Texas. What?
My name is Heather, and I am also at XO, but in our New York office. Woo! I'm the senior product manager for our registry products, and my team specifically is hiring full-stack engineers and iOS engineers. We desperately need engineers, but our sister teams are also looking for designers and senior product managers. So please apply or send your friends our way.
Hi, my name is Michelle Wernick, and for everyone looking for a product manager, I am on the hunt. I have experience with internal tools as well as front-end client-facing e-commerce, as well as editorial tools. So kind of the gamut of web, UX, UI, and all that jazz. Again, Michelle Wernick.
Hi, I'm Jackie Doe. I work for Etsy, and I am the product manager for the Sell on Etsy app. So if you have any friends or family members that create anything handmade or vintage, then you should come be a seller at Etsy and download our app. Etsy is hiring product managers, engineering, design, everyone, and we have a very remote-friendly environment, so tell your friends.
Well, I really enjoyed the talk tonight. That was exciting, and I learned a lot. My name is Dennis. I'm a product manager at a healthcare startup called Noteworth. And so at Noteworth, we are helping clinicians and healthcare systems gain more insight into patients once they've left the four walls of the clinic. So we participated in the Cedars-Sinai TechStars Accelerator last year, and we came out of that with some key learnings and a contract and even some new funding from top-tier investors. So we're looking to expand our reach this year, and to help us do that, we're hiring in product, engineering, and design as well. So if you'd like to learn more, come and talk to me or check out the careers page at noteworth.com.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Barbara DeWilde, and I work at the New York Times. And you were shouting out to us, and we are very grateful. So we work, my friends and colleagues who work on the cooking product at the Times are with me, and we are currently spinning up a new product in the space of parenting. We work in the startup side of the New York Times, but we are all part of the mission. You know what I mean by that? We are looking for an engineering lead for the parenting product. Come find me. Thank you.
All right, two more quick things, I promise. So since we are all product people here, I would ask everybody, you should be getting an email very soon, hopefully at the end of the event. It has a super short survey. We love feedback. We want to make our programming better. We want to share feedback about our speaker. It was amazing. So please take that. It's really a minute or 2 minutes, and we really appreciate it. Then, next month, I just want to talk about our speaker for next month. The event is on April 18th. It's going to be very exciting. Our speaker is actually here, Purna Singh, and she is the Director of Product currently at Quartz, and she will be talking to us about the ABCs of building a data culture. So please, the tickets are already available on Eventbrite. Take a look. We'd love for you guys to come back and talk to Purna. All right, so we're going to do like a quick raffle, and I swear we're going to be done. But since this is Products That Count hosted by DigitalOcean, so we're going to do a couple of notebooks, and then for the final prize, those awesome shark slippers that really, we don't even get those. So take out those tickets. So maybe take out, have Michelle pick one. Yes, go ahead. Yeah, pick one. You can't pick yours.
519-3584.
Oh, that was good. You want to repeat it?
I don't remember. 519-3584.
No? Oh my God, it is mine. That is really weird. I swear that was not fixed, guys. Oh my gosh. Okay. Let's have Melinda pick. Please.
Oh, that's right, you did not. Okay. You chosen. 519-3594.
Awesome. All right. Last one. The happy shark slippers.
519-3589.
Congratulations. They're awesome. They're really, really comfortable. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming. Hopefully we'll see you again next month. Just a quick reminder, DigitalOcean recycles. So just the PSA for the evening. Make sure you toss your trash appropriately, and then just enjoy the remaining pizza and drinks. Good night.